Hoje a gente vive a Era de Ouro dos super-heróis nos cinemas, mas há pouco tempo não era bem assim. E a gente vai voltar exatamente nessa época para falar sobre um dos filmes e uma das franquias mais importantes da cultura pop. No início dos anos 2000, começou a Era dos super-heróis, basicamente por causa de uma equipe mutante.
Mutation. It is the key to our evolution. It has enabled us to evolve from a single-celled organism into the dominant species on the planet. This process is slow, normally taking thousands and thousands of years. But every few hundred millennia, evolution leaps forward.
Pois é, nesse novo especial do Omelete a gente vai falar sobre a história dos X-Men nos cinemas. Ela vai chegar a um fim com a nova Fênix Negra, mas antes disso, muitas transformações aconteceram. E durante os próximos 4 episódios a gente vai fazer uma viagenzinha no tempo para discutir os X-Men nos quadrinhos, todo o legado que eles deixaram para o entretenimento e, claro, para discutir também o futuro da equipe. O mundo dos super-heróis no início dos anos 2000 era completamente diferente do que a gente conhece hoje no cinema e na televisão, especialmente por um motivo bem importante, que eram os direitos dos personagens da Marvel. Naquela época, a editora não estava muito bem das pernas e começou a distribuir as suas propriedades entre os estúdios de Hollywood. E um deles foi esse aqui de trás, a Fox. Ela ficou com uma das equipes mais importantes da história dos quadrinhos e que viria a ser um dos filmes mais importantes na construção da Era de Ouro dos super-heróis nos cinemas.
The X-Men were created in 1963 or thereabout. I worked with Jack Kirby, and Jack was, to my mind, the best artist you could find to do superhero comics. And when I told Jack about the X-Men, he sparked to the idea. He loved it. He drew the characters magnificently, I think, and we were off and running. My biggest problem was, how do they get their superpowers? Well, I couldn't have everybody bitten by radioactive spiders or hit by gamma rays like the Hulk or whatever. And I took the lazy way out. It suddenly occurred to me, if I could say that people are mutants, I need no further explanation. Actually, in the beginning, I was going to call them the Mutants. That was the original name I had. But my then publisher didn't like the name. I said, why? He said, Stan, nobody is going to know what mutants are. So I said, okay, and I went back and thought, and I figured Professor Xavier, extra power. So I went back and I said, let's call them the X-Men. He said, okay, that's fine. And to this day, I can't understand why he felt if people won't know what mutants are, they would know what an X-Man is.
And I think this was sort of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's way of commenting on prejudice in their own colorful way, in the way that plays like The Crucible. This is sort of the comic book version of The Crucible. And it grew because I think that ideology is very strong, and I also think that every young person, even if whether you're in a minority or you're not, any young person at some point in their life feels different. They feel strange. They feel like they don't belong. And they dream of going to a special place where they could be taken care of and loved for who or whatever they are.
What is this place?
To the public, we're merely a school for gifted youngsters. Cyclops, Storm, and Jean were some of my first students. I protected them, taught them to control their powers, and in time, teach others to do the same. The students are mostly runaways, frightened, alone, some with gifts so extreme that they've become a danger to themselves and those around them.
The key to the X-Men has from the start been that they were feared and hated by the world they were sworn to protect.
That was the underlying philosophy behind it, that to try to show the reader the irony and the fallacy of being against the very people who have the ability to help you and are trying to do something good.
The idea was to make a more international sense of the team, to differentiate it from the Avengers, from the Fantastic Four, from the plethora of other superhero teams that existed in Marvel and at DC. The idea of having strong, dynamic women characters at that point in the comics medium was very rare. And the idea of having a major black character at that point was very rare. Women then were basically defined as girlfriends, or the girls who got into trouble. Very rarely did you find one that's capable of holding the center of a book all by themselves. It struck a very real chord.
Além de discutir a relação entre heróis e vilões, e deuses e seres humanos, os quadrinhos sempre serviram para discutir também problemas que estão na nossa sociedade. E os X-Men talvez sejam o grande símbolo disso tudo. Ali, o Stan Lee e a Marvel usaram a alegoria de super-heróis, de humanos e mutantes, para você conseguir mostrar realmente como é o problema do preconceito e da segregação nos dias de hoje.
The mutant phenomenon, the genetically enhanced, are the next stage of human evolution.
It's all about change, and we're at that point in history where everything's about to change.
This is a very natural process of evolution, and in time, everyone will develop these special skills. Mankind has evolved.
Yes, into us.
They've developed a particular individual talent, and because some of their talents are potentially dangerous, the world at large is disenchanted.
There is this strong prejudice, which is in fact based on fear of their powers, and fear that their powers will be used against people.
You're sneaking around in here, Charles. Whatever are you looking for?
I'm looking for hope.
I will bring you hope, old friend.
We are the future, Charles, not them.
Magneto and Professor Xavier are two mutants who were colleagues, but they have parted because their philosophies have become so different as to how they could continue to live in the world.
Their ideas of the way forward is completely different. Professor Xavier creates the X-Men and the school for good, to try and encourage harmony.
The school provides a haven where the X-Men can learn to focus and channel their powers in a way which is for the general good.
He helped us realize that we are okay and that it is okay to have these powers, and he helps us use them for the good of mankind.
Magneto says, you're wasting your time, they're going to stab you in the back and they'll get rid of you at the most convenient and vulnerable moment.
Magneto has decided that if they were not the minority, if in fact they were the majority, then they wouldn't be so persecuted.
My character, Wolverine, is firmly stuck right in the middle, and he doesn't know which way to go. He doesn't particularly want to be drawn in any which way. And so for the audience, through Wolverine's eyes, they can see all different points of view.
You can't do this alone.
Who's gonna help me? You? So far, you've all done a bang-up job.
Then help us. Fight with us.
Fight with you? Or join the team? Be an X-Man? Who the hell do you think you are? You're a mutant. The whole world out there is full of people that hate and fear you, and you're wasting your time trying to protect them? I got better things to do. You know, Magneto's right. There's a war coming. You sure you're on the right side?
At least I've chosen a side.
I think Ian McKellen, is a mutant. Being a gay man, I'm often thought to be too dangerous and too unusual, too abnormal to be allowed into society as a whole. And that, therein lies my interest in mutants. And I think that's been the particular appeal of this comic strip, that it has taken a fantasy look at what it is like to be considered so unusual by society at large that they're prepared to think of you as less worthy than they are to live.
Ollie, have you tried not being a mutant?
If you're any minority, suppressed minority, homosexual, religious, Muslim, whatever it is, that is the most absurd question that people do ask. Can you try not to be who you are? And so we felt it was very important to show that absurd side.
To me, that's what it's about, this whole kind of idea of discriminating for no reason and this whole misunderstanding between groups of people, and I think it can be translated into what we see every day.
So, when did you first know you were
a mutant? You have to understand, we thought Bobby was going to a school for the gifted.
Bobby is gifted.
We know that. We just didn't realize he was...
We still love you, Bobby. It's just... this mutant problem is a little...
What mutant problem?
Hoje a gente vive a Era de Ouro dos super-heróis nos cinemas, e isso não tem nem dúvida. Mas se a gente voltar uns 10, 15 anos no passado, a gente vai descobrir que a história dos super-heróis nas telonas não é tão positiva assim. Na verdade, o público, que era fã mesmo de quadrinhos, heróis e tudo o que hoje virou hype e pop, se encontrava em lojas como essa daqui. Essa é a Golden Apple Comics, tem mais de 40 anos de história. O público que se encontrava aqui o tempo inteiro ia ver, no início dos anos 2000, a real revolução dos heróis no cinema. E o que hoje muita gente atrela à Marvel, por exemplo, foi iniciada por heróis improváveis. Um deles era o Blade. Logo depois a gente viu um filme do Homem-Aranha que fez muito sucesso, mas a equipe que fincou de uma vez por todas a ideia de que super-herói ia dar certo no cinema foram os X-Men.
I'll take care of you.
The Marvel universe, as much as the MCU began with Iron Man, the Marvel universe in cinema began with X-Men.
Before we started even the cameras rolling, I was getting calls from reporters saying, aren't you afraid of doing a comic book movie? You know, nobody's going to do a comic book movie. There had been a couple of dumb ones before. And I just said, well, we think we have a good story. We have good characters.
I think the Star Trek movies that I've worked on are very similar to this movie in a couple of ways. Number one, it's really more about the characters than it is about the action. One of the things that I've said as we market this movie, it's much more like Star Trek than it is like Star Wars. Bryan's very smart. Bryan has put heart and soul into this in terms of finding a way to tell this story that makes sense, is realistic, is not goofy, and he's completely absorbed by that and going after it. He tries to make sure that the logic makes sense, that the core fans are going to be satisfied. But he too didn't come out of that core fan audience. He's only recently been grafted into that. And so he appreciates that, but also appreciates what it is that makes a good movie and a good script.
I think from reading the script, I had much more of a comic book sense of the world and a fantasy sense. I think it's an excellent decision because it creates a believable environment for our heroes.
The history that these writers have developed for these characters is astounding. It's incredibly elaborate. And Bryan has tried to insert as much of that history as possible, to make it as real as possible and to draw the audience in and say this really exists somewhere.
Muito do que a gente conhece hoje como super-herói é atrelado diretamente à fidelidade do que a gente já leu ou do que as pessoas já viram nos quadrinhos. Mas com os X-Men foi algo bem diferente, mas que fez todo o sentido. Como naquela época as pessoas não conseguiam aceitar ainda super-heróis extremamente coloridos e que fossem um transporte direto dos quadrinhos para a tela, a Fox entendeu que era preciso contextualizar os personagens e pegar referências que naquela época faziam muito sucesso. E daí a gente viu uma equipe completamente diferente em termos visuais, mas que na essência ainda era fiel aos personagens que foram criados pela Marvel há mais de 50 anos.
Well, we used the comic books as much as we possibly could, but Bryan wanted to lift it a bit out of the two-dimensional realm and make it a real world situation where these characters may indeed actually exist. I more or less went through each of the characters and designed all the elements that each of the characters needed, whether it be wigs, prosthetics, eyes, hands, claws, knives, and all the things that those do and interact in the film.
You actually go outside in these things?
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Bryan has sort of assembled a team around himself, since Suspects. We have Louise Mingenbach back as costume designer, and she's brought, I think, a great amount of flair to the costumes, but keeping them grounded in reality. And that was the key thing, was not to make them look like they were running around in yellow spandex or blue spandex, but to keep it real.
So one of the reasons they don't run around in say, the comic book outfits of a bright yellow bodysuit is that might be kind of goofy today and would be not very realistic. So we've tried to design, from the uniforms to the powers that they have, that these people might yet be among us.
It would be very hard to translate the comic book exactly, for one, nobody has the bodies of those characters, you know, so there's no way we could look like them. So Bryan chose to make us very real and hopefully more relatable. And I think the people that are expecting to see the exact translation may feel a little disappointed or cheated, but I don't really think there was a realistic way to do that and not make it sort of cheesy or very cheap looking.
It was all leather, so, you know, the more you wear it, obviously, the more flexible it gets. But we had to kind of, do you remember the scene in the movie where we approached the Statue of Liberty at the end and we had to kind of hop over the seawall? And it's like, you know, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, you know, but you do have to take a step over or, you know, put your hand on it and hop. And they rolled camera, and it was the first time all of us were in our suits, and none of us could get over this wall.
I could hop over like this, but I can't promise you I'll land every time.
Oh my God! Whoa!
Oh my God!
Careful! It's just impossible to get your leg up.
Yeah, I know. Oh my God!
From what I've seen from the comic book, it's definitely sort of a step away from that. The Jean Grey that I'm playing is more elegant. She is kind of, like I said, she helps Professor Xavier, so she is sort of a doctor who knows a lot about genetics and things. So we have her wear glasses at times, and it's just sort of a more conservative, classic, elegant look.
I really think the major responsibility of a visual effects supervisor is to help the director tell the story. Just like production designers and cinematographers, we have to work with the director to make sure that the story the director is trying to tell and the vision that's being conveyed in the movie is unified and works all together to support that. And I don't think most people think of visual effects supervisors as anything more than technicians. I mean, most people think of us as somebody who says, oh no, you can't do that because that's too bright or that's too dark or we'll never be able to put that together, can't do that. And in fact, that's an important part of our job, and that part comes from experience. But the part that's critical to what we do is to be able to creatively come up with ideas for sequences that will tell the story.
Where the hell are we?
There are a number of times in the movie when Mystique transforms into other characters. And we're trying very hard here to not do a two-dimensional, for lack of a better term, morph. Many morphs, even when they're three-dimensional, look it's not much different than a two-dimensional morph because you're simply taking one object which is two-dimensional on film and replacing it with another object which is two-dimensional on film. And you can do some strange shape shifts and things to try to give it a 3D feel, but generally, you know, it looks like a morph.
A aposta da Fox, se a gente for colocar em medidas de produção, foi até que modesta, digamos assim. O primeiro filme dos X-Men fez um baita sucesso de crítica e fez um bom número de bilheteria. Um número suficiente para que o estúdio continuasse a apostar na visão de Bryan Singer e também no elenco, que começou a fazer muito sucesso.
X-Men 1 was always a very difficult challenge because there were so many characters to introduce to a wide audience, not only an audience that had been fans of the X-Men universe, but also an audience that wasn't familiar with them. And you needed all kinds of exposition, and there was a lot of limitations in the production. And I felt very much like I was making kind of half a movie, like I was making a trailer for a larger movie. And the opportunity to make X-Men 2, or X2, as it were, is an opportunity to make a real X-Men movie. And that's what I was excited about. Ultimately, I'm not a big fan of the phrase sequel, particularly with these kinds of films. The X-Men universe is like, in the film world, is like the comic world. You tell a story and then the story evolves and progresses forward. The word saga, I guess, comes more to mind, and this picture would be part 2 in a saga.
This is just a misunderstanding.
Put the knives down!
I can't. Look.
You know all those dangerous mutants you hear about on the news? I'm the worst one.
The screenwriting process of both films was very similar. I basically sit down with writers, collaborators, and I kind of indicate the story that I'm interested in telling, characters that I want to use, and we craft a story or treatment, and then from that work with writers to develop a screenplay.
X-Men 2 is a lot easier because now we've established the world and the characters. Of course, we have some information in there for people who haven't seen X-Men 1. We never take that for granted, but it was a lot easier to just take our characters that we've already established and create a story that they can follow.
The greatest challenge is each of our characters has unique powers, and so we want to explore each of those, and it's not like we develop one sort of effect and then repeat it a lot of times through the movie. Every power is different, and every page there's a new version of it, a new twist on it. And we want more action, we want more effects, we want to go deeper in the story. That's raising the bar for us.
Early on in developing the first X-Men film, I looked at the comic and I saw that they called it Professor Xavier's School for the Gifted. But in reality it was only about 7 or 8 mutants at any given time that were living there and doing heroic deeds, but it didn't really feel like a school. So I thought, well, what an opportunity to bring in more mutant characters and have the X-Men be the teachers and have the younger characters be the students. And by doing that, I knew that in the second film I was able to pull some characters that I was fond of out of that younger group into the main flow of the picture.
I think that kids who go through puberty everybody feels like an outcast. You don't know what you're doing, your body's changing, your hormones are raging, and I think that's what makes them identify with the X-Men. And that's another reason we brought in the younger generation.
They suggest that these two species may have interbred, evolving into modern humans. In other words, into what? Us. Right. Artie! Not here.
For me, choosing characters for an X-Men film is looking at their diversity first. How different are they from each other, and then how will they serve the story? In the case of X2, we introduce Nightcrawler.
Taking a character like Nightcrawler, who doesn't really fit, not only among people at large, but even among the X-Men, he feels a little bit odd.
You know, outside of the circus, most people were afraid of me, but I didn't hate them. I pitied them. Do you know why? Because most people will never know anything beyond what they see with their own 2 eyes.
And there are so many stories, and there's such an opportunity with a character like that to really try and communicate how he might feel in that situation.
Breach at visitors checkpoint.
Exit's not clear. We don't know how many there are. Pulse 5 secure. It's outside the Oval Office. Lock this place down!
Nightcrawler, of course, has the ability to transport or teleport himself at will so that he can move from one spot to another whenever he wants, and he just leaves a little puff of smoke behind.
how we do it in the film is like, you know, basically you just cut. And I've done some stuff where I'm like teleporting onto a wall and all these people are pointing guns at me, and actually I'm up there for ages, and in the film I'll be there for like a second because I bamf off somewhere else before they shoot me.
We're going to create Nightcrawler's BAMFs fairly traditionally. In other words, we shoot the scene with him there, and we shoot the scene with him not being there. And then we take the two and we combine them with a little bit of digital manipulation, and then he reappears or disappears. All of that's being created digitally. We're not doing anything practically on the set.
Like the Wolverine character, he's a new, strange, unusual mutant that we're able to re-explore the X-Men universe through. So he served a wonderful purpose, and he's a funny character as well as a dangerous one. And action.
Well, one of the fun things about working on X-Men, obviously, is that it's an ensemble movie, and so you have all these great characters that you get to explore. And I think, for me, as someone who's been the writer for many years now of the X-Men universe, it's always about making sure that each of the characters, even if they only have 10 minutes of screen time, each of the characters has some arc, some journey that they go on emotionally.
A lot of people have asked me what's the secret behind the X-Men's longevity. And I think it may be that there are so many characters and they've been so clearly defined, so well fleshed out, that the readers feel they know them very well. It's a constantly changing environment, and I think that's probably the reason that the interest in the X-Men has lasted so long, and I suspect will last a lot longer after this movie comes out.
Os primeiros filmes dos X-Men nos cinemas nos ajudaram a entender que a gente estava vivendo a era dos super-heróis. Mas essa equipe ia mostrar pra gente uma outra forma de conseguir fazer sucesso no cinema. Com a Fox e com os Mutantes, o mundo inteiro ia entender que os filmes derivados também podiam dar certo. E a gente vai falar sobre eles no nosso segundo episódio desse especial sobre os X-Men no cinema.